these are some great testing tools that if you haven't heard about, I think you would really enjoy in Java. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to start off with what Ken Cousin was talking about during his keynote, which is property-based testing. And so let's start off then with what is a property. So properties are going to be different. So instead of maybe like a direct assignment to a value, so all of you do TDD day in, day out all the time? Yeah, good job. Those are good. Some of you are maybe not. But for those that do TDD, or those that do testing perhaps after the fact, you assign a value, right? So if you have calculator 1 plus 1, for example, you're assigning it to 2, right? That's your assignment. That's a thing that you know. But as far as a property goes, you want to make sure a certain rule applies. That's harder in order to find out. And these rules are called properties. So property, again, is different than an assertion, like instead of 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. What we're looking at is a particular property. And this is like some of the martial arts, or at least some of the properties are like martial arts. So what am I talking about when it comes to that? I am talking about like some martial arts that if someone attacks you, you don't really hit back, but you use their own force against them. Same sort of thing is happening here. You're trying to find something that could function against itself, or some sort of rule. So I have some properties here. Let's see what you can come up with on this one. So I'll start off with this one, and maybe I got the easiest one on this one. Reversing a string. So I could say HELLO, reverse that string, and then assert that it should be OLLEH, right? That's my assertion there. But there's a property in there. I don't have to assert ELLL or now I can't do it. OLLEH. Like I could say that, that's the string that I should get, but there's a property somewhere in there. And anybody have a guess as to what that is? Without explicitly stating this is the reverse string, can you think of a neat little trick that you could do to make that assertion without that exact answer? Index. So I heard someone say index. Not quite exactly. What's that? Not length. Anybody else? What is it? Each has its own count. A count in the string. So here's this one. If I have HELLO and then I reverse it, and then I reverse it again, what should I get? Same one. That's your property, right? That's what you get out of it. If I concatenate two lists, how do I know it works without explicitly, stating that it does work? Anybody have a guess on that one? Someone said length before. I think that's a pretty good edge on that one. Yeah, length. What would be the property though? If I concatenate two lists, sorry, let me get out of the way.
Concatenate and deconcatenate.
Oh, you're saying concat and de? Yeah, could have that. Yeah. But I think the length would be good. Like if I have two lists, let's say 3 and 4 length on that, the property should be, the combination should be what, greater than or greater than equal to the smallest of the list, perhaps? Like there's a property that you can assert there. What's that? Oh, yeah. So either one of those, yeah. This one I'll take. This one's a weird one. This one's not really one that works against itself, but if you create a map is really a specification, right? Like a hash map, a tree map, those kind of maps. And when it comes to these particular maps, and here, let me ask you, if you do a map and I do a put of a map with a key and value, and then I do another put with a key but a different value, same key, different value, what's the behavior you should expect from a map? There you go. Boom. Nice. So yeah, you should get an override of that, and that's a behavior that you should expect. So what you could do in this particular case as a property is that you can compare that map to an actual map that works. So hash map and tree map, you know it works. So you know that's a functioning implementation. You should expect that same behavior, and so therefore you could do the comparison between the two. Easy one here. Anybody want this one? Absolute value of a number. What's a property here?
Sign.
Sign? Close? I haven't heard it yet. Everything should be positive, right? There's your property, okay? Easy. How many of you had the FizzBuzz test in order to get your job? Anybody take this one? You did? Okay. I was surprised by that. Yeah, I thought there would be more numbers. So this one comes from a blog called C4, I think c4.org or something like that. And I took a snapshot of it. I don't like this, actually. This one is, the FizzBuzz test is an interview question designed to help filter out 99.5% of programming job candidates, and I dislike this part, who can't seem to program their way out of a wet paper bag. I think that's not very nice. The text of the programming assignment is as follows. And by the way, this particular test is usually used for a lot of interview questions. Write a program that prints the numbers from 1 to 100. For multiples of 3, print fizz instead of the number. For multiples of 5, print buzz. And for numbers that are multiples of 3 and 5, print fizzbuzz. So I teach test-driven development. I think this is a cruel example. It looks very easy, but it's kind of cruel. And the cruelty is in the first part, or at least the first sentence here. Write a program that prints the numbers from 1 to 100. And if any of you have done TDD before, you know that when you write that for loop, you kind of seal yourself away, right? Because there's no, it's not an expression, right? It's a for is a for statement. So in other words, what happens in there, you can't get any result out of it. You seal your doom. And that's what that is over here. And we read from left to right, so you're nervous already. And if you're already in an interview question, what are you going to do? For int I, semicolon, I less than 100, I plus plus, and then whatever goes in there, you can't test, right? And that's the hard part. What you should do is take the rest of the statements and test that instead. Like you could create a fizzbuzz method and then test the input, get the output of it. And then the 1 to 100 is some kind of non-consequential thing, and that's your way out. But anyway, so that's what it is. So in other words, 3 would come up fizz, 5 would come up buzz, and then 3 and 5, like the number 15, is divisible by 3 and 5. So therefore, that should print out fizzbuzz. So on this one, the property for fizzbuzz, this one's a little bit of a trick here, but that's a thing when it comes to property testing. Try to find that particular trick that is going to help you out. Again, you don't go for that value, you go for the trick, or you go for the property. So what you could do as far as the inputs go is you could say, get me all the values as long as they're divisible by 3. And that's the only stipulation there. You just change the inputs. Get me all the numbers in the world that are divisible by 3. And no matter what happens, the word fizz should be somewhere in the word. Right? Because if it is fizzbuzz, fizz should still be there, right? If it's divisible by 5, buzz should be there. And so you just change the inputs of those numbers, and you could change the property that way. So property test is going to, as Ken said, and as I'll say right now, it's going to give you 1,000 input values or more and try to break your code, right? And that's the point of a property test. It's not a replacement, well, this is my opinion. This is not a replacement for TDD. I love TDD, and I think developing in TDD allows you to do steps along the way. It's not a randomizer of input either. What it does, it looks for outliers. What it does, it tries to be a trickster. It's trying to like really ruin your code. And so what it's going to do, it's going to go, I'm going to send in 0, -1, 1, max value, min value, right? And it's going to throw all those values in to see if your code works. So JQwik is the Java-based one. There's a, this comes from Haskell. I've been using this in Scala, and now it's available in Java. Supports JUnit 5. Reporting you get arbitrary data creation. What is an arbitrary? So if I said I have let's say an album, right? A music album. A music album has a name, has an artist, has tracks and things like that. What if I wanted to create arbitrary albums out of it? I could do that. An arbitrary would be a recipe on, here, give me all the strings, give me all the numbers, give me, a sets of time and things like that, and create a custom object from it. And it also supports result shrinking. And I hope to show you an example of what a result shrinking is. So let's take a look at JQwik here. Let's see if it looks okay here. A little scrunched, but yeah, we should see it here. So a little bit to my story. A lot of my presentations are based on my failures in life. And this is no exception here. So I've been doing test-driven development training for quite a while. And my favorite example is Caesar shift. Has anyone done a Caesar shift before? Caesar shift is if I want to tell you hello, and that's our secret message, I would, you and I would be like, wink, wink, 5, right? We would share a number with one another. No one else would know that number. So I'd say 5. And so I would write my message, HELLO, and then do a shift of 5. So HIJKLM, right? And then EFGHIJ. So I would shift all those, and then the message would be delivered. Everyone else would be like, oh my gosh, this is uncrackable. But then it would get to your end, and then you would shift back, right? And that's the idea of it. If you can think about it, where would the evil be if I had A through Z? It would be at the Z, right? What do you do if it's Z and a shift of 2? This is one of those TDD examples that are like, this is easy, right? But at the end, it's like, I'm going crazy. This is a hard problem. Anybody know of zombies? Have any of you seen The Walking Dead with zombies? And they come after you? So The Walking Dead is, there are these zombies here. But does anyone know zombies in what it means in TDD? So so if you do TDD, think about zombies. Zombies, here we go. Zombies is 0, 1, many, boundary, interface, exception, and keep it simple, or simplify. We'll do it that way. Anyways, that's what zombies is. So when you do TDD, you go about it this way. Zombies, do the 0 case, which is like this one. Test Caesar shift with an empty string and a 0. See how that works? That's your 0 case. Your 1 case would be, let's do a 1 character on that. Or let's do a 1 character with a shift of 1. If I say A and I shift by 1, then that should equal to B. Now these testing here are the exact, right? I am asserting that A should be B. A, B, blah, blah, and I just keep on going. Here's an exception, or here's an exception case, and we go on and on. Until we get to the really hard parts, and you could tell over here that we have the hard parts. We ended up with, I don't know, these many tests. It wasn't that bad, but it did take the whole day in order to do it. So at the end of this particular lecture, this particular day, I said, all right, great job, everyone. We solved it all. Now I'm just going to plug this into JQwik, and JQwik humiliated me. Right? I started crying. And here's what JQwik does. So I said, hey, let's do a JQwik test. And here's what JQwik looks like. Property, you see up here, do an @property at the top, and then you have a for all. So verify that this works for all alpha characters. So I have string alpha characters for all shifts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to display what it is. Now, here's the property again, right? It's kind of like the reverse of string. If I encode the Caesar shift and I decode it, I should end up with the original string, right? No exact value. I am looking for that particular property. I want you to go back to your work after this conference, run some property tests, and you're going to be like, well, I wasn't expecting that. But here are the inputs, if you see right over here, and for those that have the podium in the way, it'll say something like A, 0, GDM shift of -75, DD AJJJ NM and with a shift of -2700. Right? That's what it does. Oh, look at this one. Beautiful. OXM, right? That's a lot of characters with a shift of 3, right? So this thing is trying to like hurt your code and try to poke holes in it to give you, you know, something. And so this one succeeds, but when I first did this, it did not. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the encode here, and I'm going to do a mutation. I am going to get rid of this one just to show you what happens when something fails. Okay? And so here it is again. It's trying to poke holes in your code, given all these particular inputs. And look at all those A's with all those negative numbers. And so what it does here, it finds the following. It went all the way over here. At the 71st try, it found a issue. It gives you actually the randomized seed, so if you want to run it again, you could do so. And oh, I'm glad this worked for me. Look at that. So here's what it shows here. And what it says here is that the original sample for this, and it says, look, I was able to fail your test with these particular inputs. What is that? OIOFLQ BKM, blah, 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 with -214-748-3648. So what this does is before it delivers you the inputs that you could use to, you know, break your own test, it will shrink it. And so property tests will shrink the inputs to give you something a little bit more reasonable to work with. And so the shrunk sample here, and it shrunk this with 11 steps. In other words, there's logic there that tries to really just simplify what those inputs are. And so what it found, it said, just plug in A, plug in -214, etc., and now you got your new test. Nice, okay? And that's what that does, okay? So include that as part of your testing, and you'll go a long way. So what I just did right now was a mutation, right? I went in there and got rid of some code just to see if everything passed or failed, right? If I change something, if I do something bad to my code, I should expect that the test fails. Well, that's where mutation testing comes in. And this is what mutation testing is. You go to PITest.org. There's a plugin available at PITest JUnit 5 plugin. And what this one's going to do, a little thing is going to go into your code, and it's going to do something like, I'm going to take that less than and change it to a greater than, right? If you have like a, you know, an evil little creature that goes into your code and makes a change, it's going to change all the negatives into positives, right? And that's what a mutation is. And when it changes that, your test should catch it. In this case, your test should fail, right? That's, you know, that stands to reason. If you think about it, if someone goes into your code and makes a change in it and it's still green, something went wrong, right? It should not succeed. And that's what this is. Faults or mutations are automatically seeded into your code as your tests are run. If your tests fail, you did a good job, right? But if it goes green, you missed a test somewhere, okay? Run it frequently against the code or any code that has been changed. And really, that's what this is going to do. It's going to say, I'm here to destroy your code. And that's what it'll do. It'll flip things around and you know, make a mess of things. So bring that dependency in either Maven, or you can bring this in Gradle. Let's take a look here at PITest. And let me come in over here, and I'll do a terminal here. Well, now let's take a look at the setup here really quick. Let's go, that's the symbols. There's the files, POM. Let's go to my pom.xml. And how many of you use IntelliJ? Just out of curiosity. Oh my gosh. Anybody know about Command F12 or Control F12? Okay, you do. One person did. All right, here we go. The greatest thing. Okay, if you need to go anywhere within your code, you can just click on the dependency that you need, and then just jump right to it, right? You don't have to scroll. Okay. So anyway, here's this one, and here's PITest. The thing that you could add in PITest is you could just tell it which targets and which classes you want to use and where the tests are. So that's the only setup. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this. Sometimes it takes a couple of runs. I have some reports already from previous runs in case it doesn't work right now, but I'll do it anyway. So let's do PITest mutation coverage. Yeah, let's see. I'll do it again. Sometimes the second one's a charm. Yeah, no. Let me do another one here. Or at least I should do a test and then mutation coverage. Let me give that one a try. Didn't like it. It looks like it did run, but here, let's take a look. Called, okay. I'll talk about that one a little bit later, but I think it happened. So let me come in over here. I'm going to CD into target, and then I'm going to CD into PIT reports, where I have a couple of these here. Let's do 2024, 04, 24. Let's see. Interesting. Let me try another one here. 2024, 04. I'll try one of these ones here. There we go. And I'll open up the index, and away we go. So here it is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in right over here and take a look at what it did. And here it is. So I said, go into the Caesar shift PITest and go in there and do things to my code. Okay? And it should pass. And this one is an example here. Let me highlight that one. And so here's what PITest did. It said, okay, I negated a conditional, I negated another conditional, and I replaced the return value with an empty string, and that was killed. Killed is usually like a negative term, but in this particular case, this just says, I got it. My test, captured it, and everything is good. And that's what PITest is, okay? It just goes in there, changes your code, and just to ensure that your tests are going to fail, okay? And that's PITest. Cool. Test containers. I think this one a lot more people know about. How many of you use test containers? Okay. Oh, really? Not a big number. Greatest thing. Absolutely one of the greatest new things that is available. How many of you are familiar with the hexagonal architecture? Okay. Oh, a lot more on here. Whatever kind of architecture you're using, there's layered architecture, hexagonal architecture. I really like the hexagonal architecture, and I'll cut this part short just to get to the point here. But the thing I really like about the hexagonal architecture is the separation of concerns. If you do domain-driven design, they come up with a term, or they use hexagonal architecture as a really nice architecture that you can use where you can separate your concerns. And that's what the hexagonal architecture is. And here's an example of that. I think many of you design like this. And that is, see inside of that business logic there, that's your domain. These are just models. These are just records. These are classes that represent your business. These represent services. All that's in there. There is no such thing as database stuff. There's no such thing as your web server with how you handle REST or anything like that. Pure domain right in there. Everything has its place. Then see how it has those ports there? Ports are the interfaces, and then the adapters are how you can connect to it. Now, long time ago, I'm a little bit older now, the hard part was, all of it was hard, but the really hard part was the adapter on the right-hand side to test a database. Do you test databases now? Okay. There was one project in the early 2000s called JUnit. And JUnit was hard to use and still hard to use. XML based on like how you set up your database and tear it down. Some of us also used hypersonic QL. Have any of you used that one? Like they're in an in-memory database, or H2. as another project, right? If you do database testing, you'll do that. But that's usually a proxy to some other actual real database, right? So interfaces are the way that we go about that, right? I have an interface that represents a database, but I don't want to program the database, or at least some other team is programming that. DAO or repository or whatever you want to call it. Well, I've always had a hard time testing that right-hand side with the databases. And it's always been a perplexing problem. Test Container solves that, because what that does, and here it is, it uses Docker to actually bring up a database. Well, what made this possible? Well, containerization for one, faster computers for another, and just being able to run this is just a great thing, and a lot better than JUnit or using Hypersonic or any one of those databases. It plugs into JUnit and makes it very easy. So we could do integration tests, we could do acceptance tests, data access layer integration tests. And you could choose whatever kind of database that you would like. I read a book about this London style. And it comes from Growing Object-Oriented Software by Nat Price. It's an excellent book, and I've been big into TDD, and there are two different schools of thought when it comes to TDD. There's a Chicago style, also called the Detroit style. That's state-based behavior testing with triangulation. That's more of the classic style. But London TD is the mockus style, so you tend to use a lot of mocks, but they also talk about using a lot of end-to-end TDD. The reason I bring this up is because of this quote, and it really just opened my eyes, and that was, don't unit test what you don't own. And I was doing that, right? I was like testing the database. I was unit testing the database, and that was a time sink, and that was regretful. What I do now is I do integration tests with actual databases. Changes everything. Only thing you need is a Docker or a Podman, and you bring this part in first. If you're using Maven, you have a test containers-BOM, and you bring that in. That BOM is for bill of materials, if you will. And then you bring in test containers first. So I'll bring in the test containers engine. Here's how it looks for Gradle. Then next, your integration with JUnit. So bring in JUnit, and notice here the group ID, org test containers, artifact ID, JUnit, Jupyter. Here's how Gradle looks. Here's how Spock looks. Any Spock users here? Okay, one. Spock is great. Let's show test containers, and you are going to love this. Here we go. So I'm going to come in over here and take a look at test containers. Bring those dependencies in, and I'm going to do this one. And this was just a pleasure to write as an example. And I did this using TDD. Yes, TDD is usually like unit tests, but this was a TDD with an integration test. And here are the parts associated with it. Test containers, boom, number one right over here, at test containers as an annotation. Right over here is the subject under test. I'm creating a DAO or a repository that is going to be using PostgreSQL. Next part right over here. Woo! Look at this. I love you. All right, there it is. Container, and this container says, I specifically want to use PostgreSQL version 14.5. No more proxy with Hypersonic or H2, right? You are getting the exact version that you need. A friend of mine who works for Oracle said there's even an Oracle 23 free. So if you need to do testing against an actual Oracle, test against an actual Oracle. That's amazing. And lots of different databases that are available. And here's the setup. This is going to be creating a database called school. And here's my setup. And this is the way this is going to look. Notice this container that I have here, this PostgreSQL container. What this is going to do is it's going to download a Docker container, and that's what this reference is going to represent. Now, I will take that reference, and what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to take that particular container and get the URL, which is going to be very specific to it. I'm going to get the username. I'm going to get the password for that particular container and the name of the database. And this is what I did. I did unit testing against a database. Hold on here. I'm going to cry for a bit. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. So, and here it is. I have a DAO. I'm going to persist something called a student, and I'm going to assert that the key right now is not equal to null. And then, kind of like a nice test here, right? If I persist it, I should find it again after it's been persisted. And there it is. Find by student ID and assert everything as is. And then I'll do a find all as well. If I persist all these students, then I should get them back, and on and on and on. So I'm going to go ahead and run this one just to take a look, and away we go. I have everything cached here, so even if the internet is going to be slow here, it's perfectly fine, and there it is. And we get to see what actually happens. Now again, I had everything cached already, but one of the things that you'll see here is you have an engine called RYUK, and what it's doing here is it's getting an actual PostgreSQL database. Set it up, then tear it down. Beautiful, okay? And that's what test containers will do. Now, I like creating notebooks with my code, and I think it's a great way to learn how to interact with a database as well. And so that's the thing I like about it. Here's an example of me using Kafka using a database here. I have a producer and a consumer, and I just want to see how they interact with one another as a test. And I'm going to go ahead and run this one just to show Kafka running. There's Kafka available. Nice, look at that. Oh, is it going to try to download it, or did it run already? Oh, it looks like this one's going to, oh, there it goes. It looks like it had it. And so it's just running a test, and there it is, testing the integration between Kafka. Any Neo4j people here? I know they had a booth out there. Great. I don't know anything about Neo4j. So, but that's okay, right? If I don't know a particular database, create a test for it and just see how it interacts with it. Learn how Java interacts with it, and you get a great test from it. I love it. And if we go to, for example, test containers here, there's a lot more than just databases as well. If I come in over here, we'll see Cassandra, Console, CouchDB. So definitely a lot of databases, including vector databases and NoSQL databases. But I think this is one of the really nice things as well. There's a Google Cloud. There is a local stack, which represents all your AWS services. There's Azure, which of course is your Azure. So a lot going on there. And yeah, so you can test, cloud-based services, a whole bunch of other databases. And here's another one in here, if I could find it. There's etcd, but the one I was looking for is K3s. There it is. If you want to test your Kubernetes from Java, that's K3s, okay? So you could try to minimize, or try to do everything locally as needed. So I love that. A mock server and WireMock. I'm going to discuss mock server as one, but also check out WireMock. These are ways that you can generate a server using your code. And that's a really nice thing with a particular mock server. Used for testing that can return mocked or canned answers. It is your own kind of like pretend web server and acts as a proxy to a genuine website to record any kind of payload that you would like. So a note about parsing. How many of you are at JDK 15 or higher? Okay, that's a good number already. Let me describe this here really quick. I think I have an example somewhere here. Give me a second. Trying to look for it. Maybe it's here under mock server. I had a good example somewhere. Oh, you know what? I believe it's in my tests. Somewhere on here. Give me a second. Lost it somewhere along the way. But let's see, mock server, rest assured, I think, yeah, I have it over here. So here it is. And hopefully for those that are still in JDK 8, I hope you get this soon. Text blocks are the greatest thing for a tester, right? Have you ever gotten like a JSON code or, just some payload and you just want to test the parsing and you try to do this, what would happen? you had those pluses, right? And then the \r, and it was just a mess, and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? And so right over here, this one is amazing. Look at this. I just took a JSON and I pasted it in the code, right? And so a technique for testing is if you have a certain payload, you can now paste it in the code and it doesn't look that bad, and then test the parsing there. I find every once in a while, someone wants to test the whole thing, right away, which is the server, the payload. But for the payload, you could just bring in the payload and make an example, and you can create a cleaner example of it and just test the parsing that way. Then as a service, you could just tie in that service a little bit later. So that's the idea for this. Let me ask you another question. How many use Postman for testing things? That's a lot of hands. So as an alternative, again, not telling you what to do, but as an alternative, VS Code has some plugins for this, and IntelliJ Ultimate has this already built in. But one of the things for you to note is this. You may or may not know this one. But if you create a file with HTTP as the extension, then this is a runnable resource. Take a look at my line 1 up here. It has a green arrow associated with it. That means that your web service calls can be a part of your code base. That means that you can commit it. That means it could be reviewed. And that is runnable within a file. The way that you do that is you do, of course, post, get, put, whatever it is you like, your content type, accept type, and then you leave a carriage return right in between, and then you put your payload. And then to delimit that, you put pound, 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 and then you can add as many different files as you like, and this makes it runnable. Is that great? Okay, so in case you have not seen that, that's another way that you can do that. But just wanted to mention that. Very productive. But let's talk about mock server. If you ever need this, and again, the competition is WireMock. That too is excellent as well, but I only have a certain amount of time for this presentation, so I'll stick to this one. And here it is. And here's how mock server is used. You set up a mock server on this. That goes into a try with resources. And you just state what your server should do without actually creating a server. Pretty nice, right? So I could say mock server client when a request of post happens and they come in with /login and they are doing a post with this username and password, then just go ahead and respond back with a 302 with a particular cookie and with a header. Nice, right? And the thing I like about this is everything is localized. What I like doing? I like doing most tests locally so that way when you try to deploy, everything works perfectly. That's a good feeling, right? And so that's the kind of thing that does. And so what I'll do here is, if you want to use the REST template on Spring, or if you want to use what I'm doing here is HTTP client that came out with JDK 11, whatever it is that you want to do and test things out, you can go ahead and plug that in, and you have a nice isolated test without actually involving an actual server for that. Nice, right? So you could test an actual server along with that. That's pretty cool. Rest Assured is another great one. Has anyone ever used Rest Assured? Oh, okay, we got some good hands on that one. So API testing that is native to Java, okay? But I love Postman. I think you'll like this one a lot as well. This is a part of a code. Again, I'm a really big fan of putting things a part of your repository so that you can test from there, because one, again, it's reviewable, it's committed, it's a part of your project, it's not going to someone else's website, and you could make it a part of your CI/CD, okay? So it is a little bit shift right when you do this. So after staging and before production, that's a little bit of a misspell there, but if you want to test things before production, then you could do so, and you can have different levels of testing, and you could use Rest Assured in order to do it. Baseline testing, does it meet the essential criteria? Contract testing, does it meet any kind of contract criteria? Regression testing, Okay, if there's something that was introduced as far as a bug, are we able to catch that? Reliability, are things always consistent, and monitoring, so on and on. Lots of different API calls that you could make. So it's all Java-based. So bring in that dependency, rest assured, bring it in as either Maven or Gradle. And one of the cool things is that you could also add JSON path. So JSON path is going to be a way that you can assert that the path that you get from a certain REST endpoint is going to have a certain kind of, JSON that you're expecting from it. Okay, well, let's take a look at rest assured as an example. And here's a get test, which I was showing earlier. And here it is, okay? So this one I'm going to be using, here's the mock server here. I'm going to be doing both on this one. So here's a mock server that if someone calls get lotto with a 5, I could also specify things like times exactly. I'm going to respond with a response of 200 with the header and with the content type and with that particular body, right? As some code. So here's how it looks, and here's how rest assured looks. I think you'll really like this API. Let's see, does this work? Kind of. There we go. Yeah, here's the API and the way that looks. When I call something, given a particular ID, then I should get a status code of 200. And here's where that JSON path comes in. The body here, what I want to look for is lotto.lottoid is equal to 5, and the JSON lotto winner's winner ID should have the items 23 and 54. Nice, right? Nice, clean DSL that you can use. Okay? You could also do this as well. So a different way that you can go about it. Hello. There we go. So when I call a get, then status code 200, and then extract it. And now I'm doing something weird here with that new type ref. But the goal for this is, given this map that you see here, I now have a map representation of your JSON. And now that I have a map, I could just verify whatever it is that I need. Okay? Wonderful. And here's this one, finally on here, which is calling a REST content as a post, and here it is. So given this content type of JSON and given this particular body, when the post is made, then a status code 201 should be received and the body should be equal to accepted, right? So nice, wonderful DSL language that you can use with rest assured. Okay. Now, awaitility on this one. Here it is, github.com, awaitility, a domain-specific language that allows you to express expectations. Perfect tool for handling threads, timeouts, concurrency issues, and performance polling until a particular effect is completed. Oh, I skipped one part. So before I get to awaitility, one of the things I wanted to mention about test containers, I should make a slide so I can remember it next time. One of the things about test containers, I'm just going to go back a little bit because I forgot this part. Test containers cloud. What test containers cloud, I just showed you what test containers are, right? It brings up the containers that way you can test against it. What test containers cloud is this. It's an application and it sits up in your status bar. And what you'll see over here is containers running locally or run with test containers cloud. Just because containers tend to, be expensive as far as the download goes, they have a test containers cloud where the testing is actually being taken place on the cloud, and you'll get the results from the cloud. So all the heavy stuff is going to be processed in the cloud. Okay, so just thought I'd mention that on here. It is a paid service. I think they give you, I forgot what it is, like 50 hours or something like that free. But might be worth it if you're going to think about doing a lot of test containers. And one other thing that I wanted to mention about test containers, I did this presentation in St. Louis, and someone asked about, gosh, there's so many things I learned from people's questions, but they said, I would really like to use test containers for a whole suite of tests. because he had like these database, or this one particular database with certain payloads that would generate, a particular problem. And so a solution that we came up with, and we'll see what the results are for this. One of the things that you could do is you can start off with, say, like Postgres 14.5 or whatever. Start that as a base Docker, and then you can do your insert statements in there and have your particular payload. And what you could do is you could have a library of different Docker containers with different test situations. Let me come back to this part over here, and I'm going to go to the test containers one again. Right? This is Postgres, but nothing stops you, and let me just mention this, nothing stops you from creating your own custom container. So you could say from Postgres 14.5, do whatever kind of imports that you want for a particular case, and then create your own catalog for the different situations that you want to test against. And then you just plug that in here. I just wanted to mention that. This is just a Docker address on here, okay? And if you do a PostgreSQL container, it just needs to be a Postgres, but it could be your own derivation. If you'd like. So just wanted to mention that. Okay, on to the last one here, Awaitility. And so what this one's going to do is if you're doing any kind of asynchrony, which is you start something, then you want to await until something has transpired, and you could set up a particular timeout until a certain condition is met. Okay? That's the idea here. For every beginning, there's an end. For every asynchronous process that begins, there must be an end. So what are some examples where you observe an effect of an asynchronous process? Well, one was the database test, which is if I do an insert, I should probably be able to find a select based on that insert, right? It's not, it is atomic, but there's going to be some time before I'm able to see that result. You can't wait forever, so you may need to cap that with a particular timeout. And that's what Awaitility will do. And here it is, Awaitility. Just bring that in as a dependency in either Maven or Gradle. Very easy to do. And there are various DSLs that are available for Scala, Kotlin, and Groovy. Let's take a look at Awaitility and how that looks. So here's Awaitility. And here's a basic one right in here. What I have here is I have the following. I'm setting up an executor service, so that way I can do some testing here. And here's the setup for each one. For this integer future, I am returning a 30. So here's a basic one. Integer future get, though my examples are using Awaitility, take a look at your APIs because some of the APIs are blocking, right? So in a test that works out particularly well, right? Again, blocking is not always evil. It just depends where you use it. So in this particular case here, integer future get is, right, a thread goes down and then, right? And that's what a blocking will do. So this test will not terminate until we get our particular message, in which case then we could resolve that is equal to 30. But if you don't want to go about it that way, then you can use Awaitility. And here's what that one looks like. Await until this completes, and then when that completes, I will go ahead and make the assertion here that is equal to 30. And again, I'm just using future here as a simple thing, but you could apply this to whatever it is that you would like. Here's this one over here, a different way to go about it. This one over here on the right-hand side is going to be using a lambda. So it's the same thing, whatever asynchronous process that you want to retrieve, you can go ahead and retrieve that. And right over here is integer. For every integer, go ahead and take that and assign that one to 30. Okay. Here's this one right over here, same sort of thing. Await until a particular future is retrieved, and then I'm going to make that assignment right over here. I like assert J instead of hamcrest. How many of you use hamcrest as your assertion? How many of you use assert J? How many of you just use a regular JUnit one, right? Where you just make that equal. I like AssertJ a lot more. And Ken made a reference to it. I didn't see a lot of hands for AssertJ, but the idea for AssertJ is the following. And I might as well just add AssertJ as one of the libraries that I think you would need. And why is it great? Well, right over here, oops, sorry, let me highlight this. Let me offer another one, another really cool IntelliJ example. You ready for this one? Control-Shift-P. Anyone use this one? Shows the type. Nice, right? So what this one's going to do, if you put anything within that, assert that, there's a type associated with it. That if I want to do any kind of code completion in here, that's kind of hard to see, but the only things that come up here are the things that have to do, in this case here, with an integer, right? Is even, is greater than, is less than, or whatever. So I don't have to look up anything. The thing about Hamcrest is you typically have to look things up for something like that. Okay, so that's kind of nice. So if you want to use your own assertion library, you can use until asserted in order to get that as you need to. But here's a kind of more of a real world example for using Awaitility. And here it is. I have a service, I have a student ID, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that student to the student ID. But the thing is, in this case, I don't know when it's done. So I'm going to add a student, and as part of this Awaitility here, what I want to do is I want to verify that whenever I add the student, that it's going to take some time to get the student back out of it. And that's what await will do. In this case, I have an await with a particular label. I want to await for that student to be stored, and I will wait until this get student by that student ID is going to be present. And if that's the case, if that's going to be true, I want to assert that that is the case. Okay? So let's take a look at a my service. Now this time, my service is going to be a little bit of a black box. And here's what the student will do. Remember, there's some asynchrony that's going on in here, and I have no control over it, right? And this is where the awaitility will be something that would be of a benefit for you. I have executor service with a particular thread pool. I have a hash map, a concurrent hash map, since I'm using different threads here. And in this case here, I'm going to be inserting the student in this particular case, right? And let's say this is going to take about 4 seconds on each one. And so I'm kind of mimicking a situation where something is going to take some kind of time. Then when I call the get student here, what I have here is I have a printf just to show you what awaitility is going to be doing. And we'll see that awaitility, what it's going to do on your behalf is it's going to be doing a poll to ensure that. And finally, I will go ahead and get the result here. Okay. So let me go ahead and run that and come back over here. And since I have that printf here, in this particular last example, the thing that you should see here is the following. Notice it made a few calls along the way, and what it did is, you know, are you done? 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 Etc. And finally, when it finds out that everything is done, then you know, it finally is able to make that particular assertion. Cool, right? And that's awaitility. So let me ask all of you, how many of you thought JQwik was the most interesting thing that you saw in this one? One or two? Test containers. I knew that would like more hands. Awaitility? Rest assured? Mock server? The hands are like that. I knew like test containers were going to be it. Remember, there's a lot of databases that you can use for test containers, and I think you'll really enjoy that. Any questions? Thank you, everybody.